Hello and welcome to this special program. I'm Farooq Batafi, and today we are going to talk about Kashmir, especially, what India did in Kashmir on August 5. And since then, there has been 2 years, and we have seen that India keeps on unleashing more atrocities in the valley and in the adjacent areas as well. Why that is happening? Because India thinks that it has arrived, it has all the powers, influence, and it keeps on, mocking the international system, human rights, and everything that might be in the books of diplomacy. Today we are going to talk about that, and we have no better resource than the president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, who also is a career diplomat, understands all these matters fully and deeply. We are going to ask her how exactly things are going to progress in coming days and how to force India to change its position. Of late, we have heard about bilaterals, about possibility of peace building between the two countries, India and Pakistan. Is that even a possibility? We are going to do that. President Saab is here. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for the time as well. Sir, let me first ask you, in this intervening period, has India stopped actually unleashing atrocities, or it continues incrementally?
These past 2 years have been hell for the people of Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, you would recall the day, August the 5th, 2019, when Indian forces invaded and occupied the territory, and then they laid a siege to the territory. That siege continues up to this day. It started with communication lockdowns, but then everybody was imprisoned, incarcerated in their neighborhoods, in their houses, and now the entire land of Kashmir is besieged. That siege has not been lifted. Let me also tell you that during this period, India has amended land laws. It has amended domicile laws. Land laws, they have been used to grab the land of the Kashmiris. 80% of the Kashmiris' land has now been expropriated by the Indian Occupation Authorities. Now, according to some conservative estimates, they have already issued new domiciles to Hindus from all over India, and the number is 4 million. This would disrupt the delicate demographic balance of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. That's not all. Young men are being killed there every day in the so-called cordon search operations. Women have been dishonored. There are enforced disappearances there, custodial killings. Way back in 2019, these Indian authorities, occupation authorities, they had imprisoned or incarcerated some 14,000 young boys, as young as 10, 11, 12, teenagers mostly, and nobody knows what has happened to them. Nobody knows, because they've been tortured, and according to a statement which was given by Bipin Rawat, the CDS of India, that they were being re-indoctrinated in these concentration camps.
Right.
So it has been a terrible period for the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Let me also add to this. That the people of Jammu and Kashmir, the occupied part of it, they have been totally disenfranchised. Their assembly, this puppet assembly that they used to have, this was dissolved in 2018. Yeah. So they did away with that semblance of representativeness. Yeah. Second, that now they're trying to put together a new system, and they want to enlist the support of these loyalist Kashmiri leaders like Mehbooba Mufti or Farooq Abdullah, Umar Abdullah, and this experiment is also not succeeding. Right. So what I want to say is that if you look at the entire globe, the people of the occupied state of Jammu and Kashmir are the most traumatized people, are the most brutalized people, are the most unarmed people, and this outrage, this savagery continues unabated.
Right. When this happened, if you remember, generally it was the impression that India will not be able to sustain it. And because of international pressure, because of the way India actually went and did this, it will reverse it. But it hasn't happened for 2 years. Why is it that we haven't seen the kind of outcry we were expecting? I understand India has deep pockets, it is rich, influential, but regardless, human rights are human rights. And you were talking about re-education or resensitizing campaigns. So is it not exactly like Nazi camps or what other countries less democratic are accused of doing? So if India does it, it's okay.
In India today, you see fascism in action. This is a reincarnation of fascism in the 21st century. It's worse than Hitler's Nazism and Mussolini's fascism. I think that it is worse than Milosevic's murderous campaign in the Balkans. So I would say that yes, it's a very, very difficult period for the Indians, for the Indian citizens, and also particularly for the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Second, your second question was about, or second observation was about that at that time people thought that India would not be able to sustain. India was confident that it would sustain. It had in fact collaborated with Israel. It had consulted, I'm sure, Washington DC before taking these actions, and it had lined up a coalition which would support Indian actions or which would look the other way while India went ahead with its depredations in the territory. But let me also tell you that there are two factors which have supported India. One is the strategic cover that has been given by the United States to India, blanket cover, because India has presented itself as a counterpoint to China, and this is one factor, right? They have formed this coalition called Quad, and they want to militarize it, or they want to make it something like NATO and so on.
Right.
The second is COVID-19, because the world's attention was diverted, everybody was preoccupied with the survival issues, fighting the virus, this deadly virus, and under this cover, India executed all its diabolical plans.
Right.
So this is one thing. I don't think India is rich. Majority of its people are poor or below the poverty line. It's a giant with feet of clay. It has yet to reach where I think that it has reached. It has turned itself into an imperial power, and the people of Jammu and Kashmir are bearing the brunt of its tyranny and terrorism.
Right. Regarding something that you said, the cooperation between India and Israel, something very interesting has actually emerged of late, and it is called the Pegasus project. They have actually revealed that Indian government bought this surveillance software from Israeli company, and not only was it snooping on its own people, it tried to snoop on Prime Minister of Pakistan as well. Because you have a diplomatic understanding of these issues as well, do you think Pakistan can take this issue internationally and force India to make amends?
You would not get any relief, frankly speaking, because spyware has become very common. It is being used by state leaders and politicians and state agencies all around the world. And in fact, what you need to do is to strengthen the sinews of your cybersecurity apparatus, right? People get away with murder when it comes to crimes like these. So I don't have any hope, because, but it's not just Pegasus, it is other things that India has borrowed from Israel. For instance, illegal settlements.
Right.
For instance, now indicating that it would establish consulate in Srinagar, or like they did with Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, or denying the very existence of the Kashmiris. We used to mark this day, Kashmir Martyrs Day. It was marked on both sides of Kashmir, Azad Kashmir and the Indian Occupied Kashmir.
Right.
What they've done last year, they cancelled that day, as a matter of fact. So Kashmir Day or Martyrs Day was not, this is 1931
Right.
Kashmir Martyrs Day. So, and they have taken away the language of the Kashmiris, Urdu, and they're trying to impose Hindi script or
Devangari.
yes, and Hindi language.
Yeah.
All cultural symbols are being altered there. So what I want to say is that don't look for relief from the international community when it comes to these cyber crimes.
Right. But earlier, that is the reason why I brought this matter so early in the program, because I want to connect it with what India is doing elsewhere. For example, in Kashmir, it has sponsored terrorist activities in Pakistan. We have a smoking gun called Kulbhushan Yadav. Pakistan also presented a dossier proving that India is meddling in internal affairs of Pakistan and actually aiding, abetting terrorism here. In view of all that, is there no possibility at all that we can build a case that will convince everybody that India is basically a bad actor, regardless of what they are doing regarding China? I say this because the assumption is that China is going to be the next power and they want to contain it, but it is also thought to be an undemocratic force, and they say that India is democratic. So if India is also an authoritarian country, this argument is lost, is it not?
Well, India is an autocratic government. I mean, in fact, it's a fascist state. I mean, it is. It uses majoritarianism to suppress minorities and gives the impression of being the largest democracy in the world. But actually, it's a fascist state. After all, Hitler was also popularly elected. So the analogy is apt. What I want to emphasize here is that, you don't get relief for Kashmiris by invoking international law, because right now we do not have the rule of law at the international level. Okay. I mean, we're back to might is right.
Right.
So this is what is happening, and therefore we have a very narrow space to plead our case in the international forums. You talked about Kulbhushan Yadav, and I will ask a question: why haven't we done it already? India has etched Mumbai, the Mumbai attack, into the conscious and subconscious memories of the world leaders, whether it is Washington D.C., whether it is the White House or the Hill, or chancelleries of the world all around. But when we, sporadically, spasmodically build this case about Kulbhushan Yadav. He's a terrorist. He, in fact, was a state agent. Right. We have proofs, and yet it has not become part of your collective unconscious, as Carl Jung, the psychologist, mentioned it. Yeah. So it has not become part of your common or popular lingo or diction. Right. We should have, I mean, why should I use the word you? We should have publicized it. Right. And yes, we have sent these dossiers and communiques or communications, to be more precise, to the President of the Security Council and the Secretary General of the United Nations, but that's not enough. Right. Repetition is important. Repetition is the key. Right. I think that the evidence about Indian crimes, whether it is war crimes or genocide or ethnic cleansing, these are being collated by the Pakistan Foreign Ministry, and they are being sent regularly to the United Nations. Right. And this documentation will help us. It is helping us now and in the future.
Right. But regarding Mumbai attacks, it was said, or at least the foreign press keeps on telling us, that it was highlighted because other foreigners were also affected by the attack, right? In Pakistan, if India today is doing whatever we think it is doing, and recently the attacks on the Chinese office bearers are connected to their sponsored groups as well. Is it not important that we raise these matters internationally as well? Because then there is an element of sensitization that can work. Other countries become stakeholders. I haven't started on Ladakh at this moment, but these attacks within Pakistan that might actually be claimed by the agencies or organizations that claim to be sponsored by India, or we think, we know it, that they're doing. Shouldn't that case be built internationally?
Yes, Pakistan is a victim of Indian-sponsored terrorism, and this is not a recent phenomenon. This is part of their policy, and now after the ascendancy of the BJP and RSS, this is their state policy, because their state leaders and cabinet ministers, they talk about it openly.
Right.
They have said that they would use the instrument of terrorism against Pakistan. They're using that, and you find their fingerprints all over these incidents. And we talk, but we do not talk enough about these abominable incidents. The world is busy with other matters, and they look the other way. In fact, I mean, when it comes to state propaganda, you have to kind of emphasize, underline, whatever point of view you have, again and again and again, until it is registered.
Right.
One-off uproar will not help you.
Right.
One-off complaint will not help you.
Right.
The other thing is, I mean, it is quite fashionable in Pakistan to talk about lawfare. So people are saying that, I mean, you should seek legal recourse to such violations of international law. Absolutely right. We should do that.
Okay.
But I think that we should go to the places where you can raise such issues. The international judicial system, or bodies like the Human Rights Council, or let's say International Law Commission, ICJ. Nothing should be ruled out.
Right. And that, I'm glad that you actually mentioned lawfare, because if you remember, 2 years ago, when this happened, right here I interviewed you, and we actually discussed the matter of lawfare as well. Why is it that we haven't pursued that angle at all for 2 years?
I think that it is being deliberated. I think a strategy is being devised. Yes, I think 2 years, this delay is not acceptable. But at the same time, I think that this is a new kind of orientation that Pakistan required. India has been active on multiple fronts. I mean, the political front, the diplomatic front, the legal front, also the financial front, I mean, FATF, for instance. I mean, and they've been linking up these things.
Right.
Most of these charges that India has brought against Pakistan are trumped up. They're false, but somebody has to expose their falsehood. Otherwise, I mean, the world goes with interest. Why are these Western countries giving cover to India? Not because India is truthful, nor because India is presenting incontestable facts. They're giving cover to India because it is doing their bidding vis-a-vis China.
Right.
They're afraid of China. I mean, they're afraid of the rise of China. It is causing, in their mind, in the international system, in the international order. So that's why they think that India would bail them out.
Right. And this is interesting, and I have to once again go to the example of Israel. There's a reason why, because of late, we have seen that international media, international powers even, have been critical, especially during the time of Netanyahu, they were openly critical of various aspects of their policies, right? And here we have this impression that Israel is very powerful, very influential. But astoundingly, while they keep on criticizing other allies, including the US government itself, India is barely covered in international media without a kid glove. They keep on projecting India as a friend or a happy, serene place. And I don't understand, so much has happened within India, within Kashmir, with China. But why is it that there is a kind of a block when it comes to mental block, when it comes to India's atrocities in Kashmir?
You know, India is no more the holy cow that it used to be perceived some decades ago. Its real face has been exposed. In the immediate aftermath of August the 5th, 2019, there was this coverage all over the world about India's crimes in the Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And you know, mainstream media, The Economist of London, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the editorial boards, as a matter of fact, I mean, these television networks, CNN, BBC, everybody criticized India, called out India. They sided with the oppressed. They sided with the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Right. Pakistani opinion also got some traction in the international media. I think the onus was on us to maintain that momentum. We could not do so because of internal distraction and because of international developments. But let me tell you that everybody knows what India is doing there. I mean, this is what we have to understand. The West, Brussels, for instance, or Strasbourg, or London, or Washington, with their very, very sophisticated intelligence mechanisms and entities, they are not oblivious of what is happening in Kashmir. They are giving India a license to go ahead and implement its heinous agenda. They're looking the other way, and they're underwriting India's atrocities. This India's myths of Kashmir being an internal matter, an integral part of India. They know that this is not correct, because had that been the case, India would have merged Kashmir. Right. But Kashmiris do not want to live with India.
Right.
So,
and there's a commitment by the UN as well that was made in 1948. But since you're talking about how the West knows what is going on, I only wanted to talk about that concern regarding conscious, subconscious, unconscious, right? In international media, at this moment, especially recently when there was a Palestinian-Israeli war, they kept on highlighting atrocities that Israeli side was committing. Similarly, when it comes to another underdog, that is Iran, Western media still pays some heed, and they highlight their concerns as well. Europe's governments are criticized, Australia's governments are criticized. My concern was, why is it that India has become such a big exception that in the collective consciousness, in the narratives, in the words of mouth that we see, we hardly see mention of Kashmir. It was great at that time, 2 years ago, when everybody actually supported Kashmiris. But since then, Indian government keeps on adding more atrocities elsewhere. COVID-19, there are other policies regarding Muslims in India, umpteen other things, and perhaps that is why international media is dizzying for them, if that is believable. Or then India has become so powerful that no other country is that powerful right now with the media or influential.
India is not omnipotent.
Yeah.
India is vulnerable. India is fragile, I would say. And the West knows about it. Even India's economic miracle is not assured because of internal contradictions. So there are many postulates or hypotheses about India. They're not correct. As a matter of fact, the West knows India inside out. It's just that they do not want to expose it. Now, when it comes to Israel, I would say that the West is not a monolith. There's the US posture towards Israel, and there's the European Union's posture towards Israel. The United States endorses whatever Tel Aviv does, right? Because the Israeli government and the Israeli community in the United States, they have a strong leverage in the Congress, in the administration. So, I mean, they influence American politics. It is different in the European Union because the European Union has had historical ties with Palestine, and they want justice there. But frankly speaking, that also comes down to lip service. Because of the United States, there isn't much that they can do to provide some relief to the Palestinians or give them some just dispensation. So it's just, I mean, even the BDS hasn't succeeded. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel, this hasn't succeeded. So, but when it comes to your question, this is a very interesting question that why does India completely disappear from the radar screen, and why is Kashmir not so frequently reported by the international media when we know that atrocities are taking place there every day, when we know the land grab is going on, we know that 4 million Hindus from all over India have been illegally settled in the occupied territory. Why isn't it being reported? It is being reported. I mean, a couple of days ago, I think that there were 16 members of European Parliament who have criticized India. The OIC has been calling out India. Even the US Congress, you would recall, held a series of hearings. But they were, I think, controlled, and they were very sanitized. They didn't go for the jugular, so to say. But because of the geostrategic restraints, I would say. But I think that what we're missing here is that we, the people of Pakistan and Jammu and Kashmir, we should be more aggressive in our outreach. You know, it is our case, our problem. Sometimes people in Pakistan and Azad Kashmir would give the example of George Floyd, the African American who was killed. And the entire world stood up to express solidarity with the African Americans in the United States. It turned into a civil rights movement. And at that time I used to say, responding to this question, why is the world not expressing solidarity with the people of Jammu and Kashmir? I would say that first we had to unite. For us, in our television networks.
Our discourse.
Yes. That fellow Bashir who was gunned down, or other atrocities, they do not survive 2 or 3 days coverage. Then people's attention is diverted. We, as the people of Pakistan and Jammu and Kashmir, we have to stand up, speak up, show up at international forums. Day in and day out. And only then we will be able to create an impact. What I always told people that first the Americans stood up for George Floyd, American civil society, and then the entire world gathered around that call that had come from the United States.
And that is a very insightful comment. But since we are talking about international media, and I'm glad that you talked about Pakistan's own responsibility, that actually takes me to my own profession in this country, media of Pakistan, journalists, right? Let us put that on the mat as well. Let me ask you, why is it that when it comes to political issues, when it comes to other issues, every time show actually starts zeroing in on those things and continues the focus. But when it comes to Kashmir, our media private media especially. We have 50 plus channels. Shouldn't they be talking about it daily? I don't see that happening. Why is it that our media is also desensitized, that it doesn't highlight these issues with that vigor?
While responding to this question, I have in my mind this aspect that maybe somebody from Delhi or somebody from Delhi sitting in Islamabad may be watching this program.
Right.
And I don't want to give them the satisfaction that we are not covering the Kashmir issue. Kashmir issue is the prime issue, the pivotal issue for Pakistan, for every Pakistani from Karachi to Khunjarab, right? And I want to thank the governments of Pakistan and the state of Pakistan for expressing strongest possible solidarity with the people of Jammu and Kashmir despite immense pressures. And I also want to thank Pakistani media. I mean, not just Pakistan television. You've been very steadfast and you've been covering Kashmir regularly, but also private channels. When it comes to confronting India, your anchor persons have been second to none, as a matter of fact, in a face-to-face dialogue. And they have defended Kashmir well. Should we do more? Yes, I would say yes. Like in India, I mean, if you watch, there was this survey conducted some time ago, and they surveyed 200 primetime programs on all television networks, mainly private channels. And you know, there was this very astonishing statistic. They said that 80 primetime programs were done on Pakistan and Kashmir.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we need to understand our eastern neighbor, its designs. I would say that we are not hate mongers. I mean, we do not want to hate India perpetually. We are South Asia. South Asia is a community, as a matter of fact. Our geographical unit. And I think that what India has to do, it has to recognize certain realities.
Right.
One is that Pakistan is an ideological state, and it has to not only survive but prosper in its own right, and they should drop all these plans to sabotage Pakistan. Second, they should recognize upfront that Kashmir is an issue that has to be resolved.
Right.
Only then we can start any kind of diplomacy.
All right.
These are the fundamentals. These are the parameters for any engagement.
All right, absolutely so. And when one listens to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, your good self, the President of Pakistan as well, Army Chief, one is filled with this hope that Pakistan is focused on this matter and we are going to actually want to resolve this issue as quickly as possible, right? You were talking about Pakistani media. No matter whatever impression the Indian media gets, they are obsessed. But the concern at this moment is that we could have done a lot. It seems that the media forgets Kashmir often. PTV will never forget it. I used to do our Urdu program. Daily we used to mention Kashmir, right? But why is it that the media's landscape or discourse is not focusing on these matters more? First of all, as you rightly pointed out, we have to actually start this activism on streets and within our country. And then we'll be able to convince the rest of the world that this has to be done. Won't happen if on August 5, 2019, everyone is rallies to the cause. But then media forgets about it.
I would say that if India is a titan, a giant, why is it afraid of Pakistan? Why is it obsessed with Kashmir? Why is it that out of 200 programs, primetime programs, that their television networks do, 80 are on Pakistan and Kashmir? Why is it that the bulk of the Indian forces are deployed in the Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir? Why? Because there must be some potential in Pakistan. There must be something that they're afraid of. And otherwise they should concentrate on their own polity, their economic problems. But whatever ambitions they have for their aggrandizement, they're using Pakistan as a fulcrum, as a platform. So I would say that this is a challenge for Pakistan. I mean, as far as the people of Jammu and Kashmir are concerned, despite all these provisions and sufferings, they have vowed that they would get their liberty, they would get their right to self-determination, no matter what happens. And they look towards Pakistan, to Islamabad, to 220 million people of Pakistan, because they know that they are their not only brothers and sisters, but their sovereign window to the international community. Second is that this is an opportunity for Pakistan to build itself as a strong, secure and prosperous state, because that's the only way that you will be able to safeguard your vital national interests and be part of the Committee of Nations, to not just confront India, but to emerge as an equal of India. This has happened before. I mean, I always give the example of Japan. Japan is a small country. I mean, the territory, the population. It is the third largest economy in the world.
Right.
Yes. And Pakistan is compact. Pakistan has rich natural resources. It has rich human capital. So we do everything vis-a-vis India in an asymmetric manner, whether it is defense or whether it is any other sports or any other area. Let's also pursue this asymmetric strategy in economy. Pakistan should have this ambition that it should be amongst the top 10 economies of the world in 2040 or 2050.
All right. Inshallah, that will happen. But let us come back to Kashmir and the elections that took place. We understand that on one side, India keeps on stripping, Kashmir, illegally occupied Kashmir, of all the, rights. And on the other side, Pakistan has conducted successfully these elections. Now that a new government is formed or is being formed, what can the new government do to ensure that Kashmir issue stays on global radar and it is highlighted?
Well, before responding to your question, let me first contrast the situation in the Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Azad Kashmir. In the recent past, we held elections. All political parties participated in the elections. All sorts of views were expressed, for and against. There was this passion and enthusiasm. The turnout was very high, and the entire Pakistan was watching these elections. On the other side, they have dismantled the assembly. They have also taken away basic freedoms and all civil, political and economic rights of the Kashmiris. Kashmiris are unrepresented in any forum. So, and they do not have the right to speak. I mean, in one of my recent statements, I said that, sarcastically of course, that the day would come, I dread, when loud breathing would also be treated as a treasonable act in the Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, where they are going around. What's happening there, just digressing a bit, I will tell you that nobody is sending so-called militants across the line of control. Everybody knows, from Azad Kashmir. Everybody knows. Why do the Indians say, or why does the DG police say that they have 200 militants there? Because they have planted them. They have planted them for false flag operations. And usually you use them as an excuse to target and kill and eliminate non-combatants. These people who are pursuing their freedom movement peacefully. And to give this false impression to the rest of the world that there's militancy, there's 900,000 troops are fighting 200 militants. Hence the small number of militants for which 900,000 troops have been deployed. So what I want to say, but coming back to your question, The question is what the new Azad Kashmir government should do. I think that they should maintain the momentum. There is momentum. There is international attention to the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. The world is keen to listen to your point of view. And the Azad Kashmir government should collaborate with the government of Pakistan, with the state of Pakistan. And sometimes Kashmiri politicians have been saying that they should be empowered to project their own point of view. But I would say, and I have experienced it myself, that there are no barriers. That there are no barriers. I have gone to scores of places all over the world and have met parliamentarians there, addressed universities and think tanks. I've also met these wonderful, wonderful Pakistani parliamentarians or Pakistani leaders who have turned this Kashmir movement into an international movement. So I think that we have this, and people are appalled. I mean, when you go around the world, people are appalled when they come to know about the atrocities taking place in the Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir in this day and age. So there's hope. You know, I recall George Galloway, this MP from the United Kingdom. He used to go to the Hill, I think in the late 90s, and while addressing, there used to be a day on the Hill in Washington, D.C., where senators and congressmen would come, and he used to start his speech that in the United States people think that there are 900 million Gandhis living in India. And at that time, the population of India was 900 million. That's not the case. The United States, I mean, this I'm partially responding to your earlier question, that the United States is still under that false impression that there are 1.3 billion Gandhis living in India who do not believe in violence and so on. But, you know, this is belied by the United States State Department's own reports. I mean, the maximum number of state encounters and forced disappearances are being reported in India, not just in Kashmir. Right. In Kashmir, the number is very high, but in all states of India, extrajudicial killings are rampant.
Right. When it came to power, when it went for demonetization, when it started, confronting other countries, try to win an election by escalating threatening a war with Pakistan, and repeatedly after COVID-19 situation, the second wave, the way they dumped the bodies in water just to hide the fact that so many people have been killed, everyone thought that they will lose power soon or one day. But somehow, despite all these Nazi tactics, despite NRC, despite CAA, despite making a pig's breakfast of the economy, they still are in power. They think that they are going to continue, and you're right that whether Indians are Gandhis or not, if they are Gandhis, these Gandhis are wearing Nazi swastika badges on their shoulders at this moment.
Fascism continues to flourish until it collapses. So Hindutva will continue to succeed until it disintegrates India, because they are driven by hatred. How can you unite people by peddling hatred? So this is what is happening in India. And second is, I talked about the strategic umbrella that has been provided to them by the United States. About internal politics, I think that I said earlier that there's a high degree of fragility in the so-called Indian Union. And I think that I would not take issue with India's internal matters if they did not impinge on Pakistan, or if they did not target Pakistan or the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, let me tell you why. You see, they're targeting Kashmiris, of course, they're killing them. There's a genocide going there, going on there. And then they are targeting Muslims, our fellow co-religionists. They are targeting Dalits, who are very vulnerable human beings. we all belong to one ecosystem, social ecosystem. So we can't remain impervious to these crimes, because these crimes cannot be contained within borders. For instance, the crimes that are being committed in the UP cannot be contained to UP because they spread. So that's why I would say that the fault lines of two-nation theory have re-emerged. We have to regroup ourselves, and we have to come up with a different strategy, not just for the survival of Pakistan, but also for a proactive strategy, so that we can play a greater role in regional and international politics.
Last question, sir, because there is this impression that due to COVID-19 situation in India, Modi's and his own supporters actually died during this oxygen crisis and all whatnot. At that time it was thought, and even right now it is perceived, that Modi's stock might have diminished considerably. And there was this thought that India might actually reach out to Pakistan and there might be some kind of bilateral rapprochement. Is there any chance of that happening at all? And if that happens, will India be ready to reconsider its position like we have demanded before opening any dialogue?
Well, you've raised many points, but first I want to sympathize with the people of India who have suffered because of COVID-19. They've gone through terrible times, and our hearts go to the affected families. Second, I would say that India's offers of talks have always been disingenuous, and in the recent past they haven't made an offer. As a matter of fact, they have used back channels to prompt us to say that we are ready for talks. They never uttered these words. I mean, back channel or direct channels. I think the Pakistan government officials have denied that there is any back channel or there are any indirect negotiations going on between India and Pakistan. But my stance consistently has been that bilateral talks between India and Pakistan have proved to be counterproductive, because we've been working at cross purposes. India has been trying to delay the entire process to consolidate its occupation of the territory. Pakistan has been seeking a just and lasting solution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute in accordance with the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So, I mean, we did not have the median point. We did not have the common talking point, as a matter of fact. I have participated in many negotiations, and for negotiations you have to explore common ground. The common ground at the bilateral level doesn't exist at all when it comes to Kashmir, and that's why they have been cluttering the agenda with religious tourism and Sir Creek or commercial links between India and Pakistan and so on. Siachen is related to Kashmir or Wular Barrage, directly or indirectly. So I would say that don't give an impression of engaging India at this juncture. Why? Because if you would do that, Indians would be quick to exploit that and give the impression that Pakistan has endorsed the steps they have taken since August the 5th, 2019. This is one thing. One photo op, one handshake between the foreign minister of Pakistan and the foreign minister of India would seal the fate of the Kashmiris, or probably a communication between our two prime ministers, Prime Minister of Pakistan and Prime Minister of India. One. Second is that if you do the forensic audit of the bilateral talks that have taken place since the 1980s, they have produced nothing. And they, in fact, Indians are so condescending, so arrogant, they have so much hubris that they make Pakistan beg for talks, and just agreeing to an agenda or agreeing to a timetable, they think they're making a concession to Pakistan. One. Second, I think that many new windows have opened. People have, I mean, in the aftermath of August the 5th, 2019, people have talked about international mediation, people have talked about some statesmen stepping in. The United Nations was activated after half a century. So what I want to say is that why surrender that territory? Because this pressure is the only thing that has been forcing India to appear to be a bit reasonable towards Pakistan and Kashmiris.
Right, Mr. President. We have many questions, but this actually brings us to the end of the time that was there. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here, and honor as always. Viewers, you have listened to Mr. President. The matter of Kashmir, of course, needs to be highlighted repeatedly. But one aspect that I was earlier asking about and highlighting, and I've been highlighting it for quite some time, is why is it that the world's media and collective consciousness creates a mental block whenever it comes to India's violation of human rights? That's a big question, because that reminds me of 1930s, when the same argument was given for Hitler, and it was thought that because Hitler will counter or undermine Soviet Union, that was considered a threat, it should be bolstered or supported. Chamberlain actually went to a great extent to appease him as well. Is it not true that that is exactly what is happening? Because whatever China does, India at this moment is spreading or actually enforcing Nazi agenda within their country. Let us hope that once again we don't end up with the same kind of paradoxes and same kind of bleak situation where millions died. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.